So, who is Milo Yiannopoulos and what exactly does he stand for? Well, we're going to ask the man himself because he joins us now from New York City this morning. Milo Yiannopoulos, welcome to Studio 10.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, you have... Your critics call you anti-Semitic, homosexual-hating, white supremacist, yet you've publicly said that you are a proud gay man, you have Jewish heritage, and you've just recently married your black boyfriend. Congratulations, by the way. Lots of people...
Thank you so much.
Lots of people want to label you, so tell us, what does Milo stand for?
Well, I'm a free speech activist, so sometimes I say outrageous and controversial things. Sometimes I'm a jokester and a trickster and a Loki-esque figure. The political left, the feminists and the social justice warriors and the leftist journalists don't like me very much and call me a variety of names because they find me difficult to categorize. They don't understand how a gay guy could have these opinions or whatever. I don't really fit into any box, so I represent sort of a threat to them because I'm persuasive and charismatic and have a huge fan base. They just really don't know how to deal with me.
Very modest as well, darling.
Also very humble, very humble.
Because, Milo, I'm a feminist, and I'm proud to be a feminist, and a lot of what you say...
That's okay. I'm sure they'll cure you soon.
No.
There's chemotherapy for that.
No. What... I suppose, of course, everyone is entitled to a view and to free speech, but the issue that I have with you, and I suppose a number of critics have with you, is that you seem to just stir up hate for the sake of it, because you want to get a reaction, because you want to provoke, and you don't seem to then take the consequences for that.
I don't think it's fair to say I stir up hate. I mean, most people would admit, I think, if they're being fair and reasonable, it's very difficult to describe yourself as not a feminist if you're in public life. And that's an enforcement of a particular political orthodoxy that is not shared by the majority of the public. I mean, very few women describe themselves as feminists. Fewer than 1 in 5 in America, just 7% in England. I'm sure the numbers for Australia, being a very sensible country, are about the same. These ideas that are being enforced in popular culture and on TV are not views reflected in the public. And the gap between the media and people at home is growing all the time. That's my insight, and that's what I seek to expose and ridicule and have fun with. It's perfectly fine if you're a feminist. My problem isn't that. My problem is not you personally, but my problem is with those feminists who require us all in public to say we are too, when we might not be. We might think that feminism has run its course and had its day, I'm not particularly interested in anybody else's specific positions. What I'm interested in is an open marketplace of ideas. A fair, open system where everybody can express themselves without fear of censure, without fear of professional disaster or social, peril, just because they cracked the wrong joke on Twitter or because, they used the wrong language at work.
Can I just interrupt for a second, Milo, because just pick up on what Jess says. You do throw these social hand grenades out there and you do say things like feminism is cancer, but if you drill down past the headlines and read some of your work, I've read your book, I've listened to a number of your podcasts, you do make some fair points, but do you think this kind of outrageous shtick that you have is hurting you and turning people off listening to you?
No, I think the opposite's happening. I mean, millions of people on Facebook, a sold-out tour. By the way, Sydney is completely sold out now. We're adding a new date on the 30th of November. Very obviously, the opposite is true. There is a huge appetite for somebody who doesn't mind thumbing their nose and sticking their tongue out and pointing their middle finger up at the scolds and the nannies and the people who want to tell us how to live.
Milo, you
for
do more
years,
than
conservatives...
But you do more than stick your tongue out. I mean, because of the sorts of things you've written along the lines of Islam is a cancer, feminism is a cancer.
I never wrote that, actually. That was invented by a journalist. The feminism's true.
You rally your followers for hate campaigns. There was Leslie Jones, who was in Ghostbusters.
Well, what do you mean by hate campaigns? I mean, this was invented by the media. I wrote a review of Ghostbusters.
Invented.
I don't want to get into little details, but
no,
I wrote a review of
detail.
Ghostbusters that defended her.
It isn't.
No. The little detail is that actually, I wrote a review of Ghostbusters that defended her. Then some people said some mean things about her, and I was blamed. Well, we don't blame Beyonce when her fans say mean things to Taylor Swift.
Wait a minute.
We don't blame, Justin Bieber when his
followers who said incredibly racist things about her.
Some mean people.
So
I went on CNN and I said it was horrible, I said it was terrible. But I'm not responsible for what they say. I'm responsible for what I say.
Of a consequence of what you say, because I think there is so much hate in the world, and you seem to think it's funny. You seem to sort of think...
Oh, I do think it... No.
But it's not funny.
Most of what's characterised as hate and abuse and harassment, this is all a sort of a hysterical drumming. It's like a moral panic by the media. The reality is some people in power don't like jokes being made about them. And I'm perfectly happy to tell jokes about powerful people because they can take it. I don't tell jokes about ordinary private citizens. I don't ruin the lives of private citizens like journalists do. Gawker's journalists who destroyed that woman, Justine Sacco, because she told the wrong joke. I tell jokes about people in power. I tell jokes about politicians, celebrities, journalists, university professors. I tell jokes about people in positions of huge institutional power who can take it. I punch up, not down. You know, and I tell jokes that a lot of people find funny and are amusing. Now, the actions of a small...
What you do is that because you continue this hate, it then encourages other people to think, you know what, this is all right to have a
calling it hate.
I think you're being...
I think you're over-egging the pudding. You know, this impish gay man who tells a few waspish jokes.
Have threats of rape made against them on Twitter. You think that's over-egging the pudding, do you?
Well, you're implying that I'm responsible for rape threats now on the basis of no evidence whatsoever.
I don't think Milo actually...
Why do you think I'm responsible for rape threats?
These things you're talking about people who follow him.
I think you might be misled by news report. I'm probably the most lied about person in America, if not in the world. I think, and I sincerely believe that you are you know, being straight up with me and are conducting the interview with integrity. But I think that you've been misled by inaccurate press reports about what I have personally actually done. And very often you'll find, because I'm in the midst of these culture wars in America, which are very bloody and very dirty, full of name-calling and false accusations, right the way up to the Washington Post, I think that you've been misled.
Why do you call Donald
if you can give me a specific instance of something... Well, let me just finish my point, and then I'll tell you why I call him Daddy. If you can think of a specific instance in which I have ever said anything that has directly given rise to rape threats of some women, please tell me, because I don't know what it is.
Well, Leslie
what
Jones
I do is
would
crack
say
jokes
that
about
you
celebrities.
Have. And you were taken off Twitter
Let me tell you, Leslie Jones, not to get too much into this because I've been over it so many times, but Leslie Jones was responsible for targeted harassment on that platform. I wasn't. Leslie Jones was, you know, retweeting all kinds of stuff about me. I barely mentioned her except to crack a joke about her looks, which I'm entitled to do. If I can't comment on a celebrity being ugly, then, you know, literally the roof is going to come down.
Yeah, but you've got to take a consequence for us.
You know.
And all the stuff you did with Gamergate.
Well, you know, I accept responsibility from my own actions. And you can throw out names like Gamergate, which your viewers are not going to understand. But the reality is I took the side of what I consider to be, you know, consumers over the establishment. The consumers, actual video gamers who were worried about their art form being poisoned by social justice. Just like social justice has ruined comic books, ruined Hollywood, ruined the Academy, ruined journalism. And everybody agrees with it. 65% of people in America think the press routinely makes stuff up. Why? Politics, the left. And you know, we didn't want that same thing to happen to video games, so we resisted it. And for our trouble, we were called all manner of terrible things and accused of things we did not do.
Because you trolled women, that's why.
All kinds of things get through. Did I
Yes.
troll women?
Can I just ask a question?
You seem to be accusing me. You're accusing me of things that I never did. I'm responsible for what I do. I'm much more interested, by the way, in your question about Daddy and about Daddy Donald Trump. I called him that because I think it sort of annoys everybody, but also because it reflected the role that Donald Trump was playing in culture and in society at the time. He was one of those people that kind of slightly made you cringe sometimes, made you a little embarrassed sometimes, but was basically right, basically had your interests at heart. And if you stuck by him, you knew he was going to look after you in the end. I found that a lot of female voters who you might not have imagined would vote for Trump because of perhaps his locker room talk or whatever, were voting for him anyway, and they loved him. Why? Because he was this strong, masculine figure who projected strength and maybe a little machismo versus the previous president who was, you know, limp-wristed and useless and never inspired. There were no women fainting in the aisles or you know, lightheaded on the chaise longue for Obama towards the end. But there were for Trump, and I found it fascinating. And so anyway, I called him Daddy, and it annoyed the left and the right, which is exactly where I live. If both sides are upset with me, that's what I want. I want both the conservatives and liberals mad with me, then I know that I'm probably okay.
I just want to... Are you the subject of fake news, then?
Of course, of course. I mean, any conservative in public life is going to be routinely, you know, lied about, demeaned, ridiculed. look at how hard they come at me. They've called me a pedophile apologist when actually I'm the victim of it. They've called me a neo-Nazi and a white supremacist when actually white supremacists and neo-Nazis hate me. The Daily Stormer, which is the biggest white supremacist blog in the world, declared a holy crusade against me. No one reported that. You know, they threatened to boycott where I worked until where I worked fired me. Nobody reported that. The fact is, the far left and the far right both hate me equally, but it's only the left that gets reported on, and I consistently, because I'm effective, get smeared as far right. When somebody calls me far right, what they actually mean is I'm right-wing and really good at my job. I'm right-wing and I'm persuasive. And this far right label is something that the media does to attempt to suggest that I'm beyond the pale and not fit for public consumption. Well, guess what? I am, and millions of people agree. My book, despite no mainstream media interviews, despite no reviews in the mainstream press, was on the New York Times bestseller list for 5 weeks. You don't get that by being some crazy, hateful crank. You get that by telling jokes and telling the truth that ordinary people want to hear, and by speaking truth to power. All of my readers understand it because they actually read what I say instead of reading what people say about me. And all of my viewers and my fans and the people who come to my shows get it because they actually listen to me instead of what left-wing journalists say about me.
I certainly understand that, Milo. And when you speak, you're often very funny, often very witty, and a lot of what you say is often very interesting. I remember listening to a speech you gave at one of the universities where you talked about, the origin of religion and the role of marriage and protecting women's rights and making it about consent. And I love history, and I thought that was very interesting, and you raised a lot of very good and unfashionable points. And then it sort of veered off into something along the lines of, aren't all feminists ugly or something like that. And I just kind of wondered if, I mean, have you become now a sort of captive of some of these a bunch of sort of followers or a sort of mob that wants to cheer and shout when you say things like that, but actually doesn't get you? I mean, I kind of get the feeling that Donald Trump wouldn't actually get you. He wouldn't actually understand half the jokes you're making.
Well, daddies never get the children, but no, I don't think that's true. I think what I do is weave highbrow and lowbrow. In my columns, you'll see, low rent jokes, and you're like, ugh, that was low hanging fruit, or ugh, do you have to be so mean? It was like, newsflash, gay guys can be catty. I try to blend. I tried to blend low culture with theology, with history, with sociology, with science. So you come to one of my talks, I did a talk about how fabulous Christmas was, which I think is the one you're referring to. I was talking in theological terms about how the church invented marriage as a way of protecting women, and how that comes from Catholic tradition, all the rest of it. My talk, 10 Things I Hate About Islam, which was obviously provocatively titled, then went into the theological differences between Christianity and Islam, the conception of God being different, how to practice faith. I try to blend lowbrow and highbrow, and that's very unnerving.
And I don't want to interrupt, but I suppose that's part of the frustration, because you make a lot of good points about the censoriousness of the left and the outrageous things that's happening on US campuses now, where they are just shutting down debate and banning people and calling anyone they disagree with a fascist. But I guess it sort of gets undermined when you unleash these kind of primal forces that we're seeing in politics now on the extremes.
No, but it's only journalists. It's only journalists who think that my position on this is undermined by my language here. Everybody else loves it. It's only journalists because they're so earnest and high-minded and stuffy and pompous. No offence, I'm not talking about you, but other journalists who say this stuff, we're just getting to know one another, so I don't know what you think. But other journalists who say this stuff, they're sort of, you can't possibly use this language, blah, blah, blah. Give me a break. If I want to say that feminists are fat and ugly, which, by the way, most of them are, then I will. If I want at the same time to talk about... if I want to say at the same time that, if I want to make a complex historical point about the different emergences of strands of feminism, if I want to talk about the virtues, of equity feminism versus whatever, I can be both and I can do both. And you know what it shows when people are upset about those two things? It shows that there's a double standard at work. You are perfectly happy for Jon Stewart, for Bill Maher, for Stephen Colbert to blend highbrow and lowbrow, to be both comedians and cultural commentators, to be clowns and historians. You're perfectly happy when a left-winger does it. But for some reason, now I've arrived, I'm the first person on the right ever to do it, And suddenly people are like, wait, you're not supposed to do that. Conservatives aren't supposed to behave like this. Wait, you can't be real and funny and dangerous and also a bit offensive and be able to talk about Nietzsche and Sartre and Heidegger and Descartes. What is going on here? Well, I'm sorry, but this is a double standard. We've had it for decades on the left. Well, now you have it on the right. Welcome to the new era. You know, and if people don't like it and people can't cope with my blend of elevated discourse as well as low-rent cattiness, that merely demonstrates their own hypocrisy. The fact is, most people love what I do. They come to my shows in droves, which is why we're sold out in Sydney. I'm looking forward to selling tens of thousands of copies of my book when it goes on sale November 2nd in Australia. And I can't wait to explore the country, because Australia's, I think, my number 3 place for fans. Millions of Australians watch my stuff. They read my columns and watch my videos. I think Australia needs saving from their own media.
All right. Well, Penthouse Australia is bringing Milo Yiannopoulos on his Troll Academy tour to Adelaide, Perth, Melbourne, Sydney and the Gold Coast from November 30. You can get all the details at milolive.com.au. I need to lie down after that interview, Milo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Me too.
Thanks, Milo.
Thank you so much.